I was 8 when I realized I wasn't the main character in my own home. That winter, our living room had been transformed into a gallery of glowing faces, portraits of my sister Vanessa in glittering costumes, grinning with trophies or waving flags at school parades. In the corner, half obscured behind a dusty wedding photo of our parents, was one faded picture of me in second grade, blurry, underexposed, and slightly tilted. I remember standing there in my oversized sweater, teeth chattering from the draft, pointing to the wall and asking, Mom, why isn't there more of me up there? She didn't even look up from the laundry. Just said softly, You have to try harder if you want your picture on that wall, sweetheart. We lived in Toledo, Ohio, where winter came early and left late. Our house was one of those old brownstones that creaked at night, and everything inside had a designated place except me. My father, Donald Carter, owned a chain of used car dealerships. My mother, Marion, was a former music teacher who quit after Vanessa was born to focus on shaping greatness. Vanessa, 6 years older, was the golden child, a child prodigy with perfect pitch and perfect posture. When she sneezed, the house stopped. When I got straight, as they asked what Vanessa's grades were back in middle school, and reminded me to eat less cereal. I wore Vanessa's old coats, old scarves, old shoes, things that still carried her scent. One year, I waited anxiously for her prom dress to be handed down. I imagined myself walking into my first dance wearing it. Maybe someone would notice me. Maybe I wouldn't be invisible anymore. But when it was finally my turn, the dress was so worn the sequins had fallen off and the zipper stuck. I held it up to my body in front of the mirror, only to hear my mother mutter from the hallway, It's still good enough, Lena. Don't be so materialistic. Every birthday of Vanessa's was a neighborhood affair. Streamers, balloons, catered food, 3-tier cakes, and a chorus of congratulations. Mine? A microwaved cupcake for mismatched candles and a half-hearted family rendition of Happy Birthday under dim kitchen lighting. I once thought maybe I deserved it. Maybe I wasn't as special. But as the years went by, the silence became louder, and my hope dimmed with each passing celebration. By the time I reached 7th grade, I was named assistant editor of the school newspaper. I brought home the announcement with trembling hands. My mother barely looked up. Vanessa was editor-in-chief in 6th, she said, adjusting her glasses. When I won 2nd place in a state-level art contest, my father just shrugged and said, Your sister sang for the governor at your age. I laughed it off, pretended not to care, but inside, something twisted, something small but sharp. A quiet fracture. Even at dinner, conversation circled around Vanessa. Her debate competitions, her scholarship interviews, her new vocal coach. I sat there, dragging my fork through mashed potatoes, wondering if I was even real. My friends would joke, You're like the Carter family's ghost intern, and I'd laugh too. But each joke chipped away at something I couldn't name back then. One night, after Vanessa got into Cornell and the whole neighborhood was invited to celebrate, I climbed out onto the roof. I sat on the cold tiles in my old coat, legs pulled tight to my chest, watching the lights flicker through the windows below. I saw my parents holding her, clapping, beaming, the camera flashes lighting up the house like it was New Year's Eve. I wasn't invited to the stage. I wasn't even on the guest list. I whispered to the stars, One day, I'll be somebody they can't ignore. But that day felt impossibly far away. By the time I turned 17, I had stopped expecting applause. I had stopped waiting for someone to look up when I entered the room. I didn't chase praise anymore. I rationed hope like stale breadcrumbs. Enough to survive, but never enough to thrive. In my final year of high school, I was juggling 2 part-time jobs, straight A classes, and leading the school's creative writing club. But at the Carter house, it barely caused a ripple. Vanessa, now a senior at Cornell, had just announced she'd been selected to co-host an academic podcast. My mother nearly cried from pride. That's our girl, she said, brushing her hand across the photo wall, where Vanessa's face grinned in every frame like a trophy, while mine remained tucked away in the background, sun-faded and forgotten. When the acceptance letter from Northwestern University arrived, I didn't scream. I didn't run down the hall like I used to. I simply sat at the kitchen table and unfolded it with shaking hands. I had done it, one of the top programs in the country. I placed the letter right next to the coffee pot, hoping, maybe, that this time someone would notice. They didn't. That evening, my mother was on the phone with Vanessa, cooing about her new podcast and what outfits she should pack for a New York City networking event. My father scrolled through car sales numbers on his iPad. I cleared my throat and slid the letter toward them. I got in, I said, Northwestern, early decision. There was a pause, a brief flicker of acknowledgement. My mother glanced at the paper, then at me. Oh, that's good, honey. But that tuition must be expensive, right? My chest tightened. Are you saying we can't afford it? My father sighed, not looking up. We can help a little, but you'll probably need loans. Maybe apply for more scholarships. Then he added, almost like a joke, unless you want to take a gap year and help out at the dealership. I nodded slowly. Right, of course, because Vanessa's wedding comes first. They froze for half a second, and then my mother replied, Don't be bitter. Your sister has a lot going on. You'll understand when you're older. That night, I didn't cry. I stayed up and reapplied for every scholarship I could find. Merit-based, need-based, essay contests, obscure foundation awards, anything. I signed up for more weekend hours at Donovan's Bakery, and I made a quiet vow I would go to college. And I would do it without ever begging again. 3 months later, Vanessa announced her engagement to Jack, a finance major from Cornell, whose handshake was firmer than his personality. My parents were ecstatic. We'll host the wedding at Lake Erie. Full service, outdoor fireworks, the works, my mother declared. I stood frozen in the kitchen, clutching a butter knife mid-spread as I overheard my father mumble, We'll have to take out a loan. Don't tell Lena, it'll stress her out. I heard it all, every word, and I knew, without a doubt, that my future had been quietly mortgaged to pay for Vanessa's white dress and string quartet. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. I buried myself in spreadsheets, budgets, scholarship forms, and side gigs. I told myself this was temporary, that once I got out, I'd never look back. The day I received my official enrollment packet from Northwestern, I brought it home like a peace offering. My parents were seated at the kitchen island, comparing cake samples. I held it out to them. I got in. Everything's confirmed. My mother looked up for a second, then returned to the frosting chart. Good timing. We just finalized the flower arrangements for the wedding. Maybe you can help us figure out the guest list later. I stood there, envelope in hand, heart hollow. I realized something in that moment, something that stung more than any rejection. I could win awards, graduate valedictorian, get into the best school in the state, and I would still be optional in this family. A placeholder, a convenience. That was the night I stopped seeking recognition. Not because I didn't want it, but because I finally understood they were never going to give it to me. Chicago felt different from the moment I stepped off the train. The air was brisk, the buildings taller than I'd ever seen, and the wind off Lake Michigan sliced through my coat like paper. But I didn't mind. I had made it. I was finally somewhere no one knew me as Vanessa's little sister. I moved into a cramped student dorm on the west side of campus, took a part-time job at a coffee shop 2 blocks down, and told myself this was the beginning of something real, something mine. But it didn't take long before my phone rang again. Lena, my mother's voice chirped like a songbird, too sweet to be trusted. Vanessa has a doctor's appointment. Jack's traveling. The twins are fussy. Just a quick trip home this weekend, right? You can take the Greyhound. I'll pay for the ticket. I stared at the ceiling of my dorm room, calculating how many hours of work I'd miss, how much sleep I'd lose, and how quickly I'd fold. And just like that, I was back in Toledo, 16 hours on a rattling bus, arriving with cramped legs and a stiff neck, only to spend the next 3 days chasing 2 sticky toddlers while Vanessa napped in yoga pants and my mother praised her for how hard she's trying. After that, it became a pattern. Every school break, every national holiday, every rare long weekend. I got the same call. Lena, your sister's exhausted. Jack's out of town again. Abby's on the verge of burnout. Can you help, sweetie? You're so dependable. No one ever asked if I had midterms, if I had work, if I had plans. To them, I was the good daughter, the flexible one, the built-in safety net they could drop everything on and walk away. One Christmas, when I finally mustered the courage to say, "Mom, I have finals next week. I really can't come," there was a pause, then a sigh so heavy it cracked through the phone like thunder. "So, you're abandoning your family?" I stood frozen in the back room of the coffee shop, clutching the phone like it might burn me. Abandoning? Mom, it's one weekend. I have 2 essays due. She just gave birth, Lena. She's practically drowning. If you don't help, who will? I bit my tongue. Hard. What about Jack? I snapped. Where's her husband? My mother scoffed, like I'd ask something obscene. Jack's a man, dear. He has work. You know how useless they are with babies. That moment, that sentence, it embedded itself like a splinter under my ribs and never left. By my sophomore summer, I had a perfect GPA, a tentative promotion at the cafe, and finally, plans for a week off. A real vacation. My first one ever. I'd saved for it penny by penny, folding bakery boxes, wiping tables, memorizing coffee orders like scripture. I'd booked a room in a quiet in near Lake Michigan. Not fancy, just clean, quiet mine. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want to hear my mother ask, "Is Vanessa coming too?" Or my father warn, "Don't waste money." But 2 days before my trip, Vanessa called. No greetings, no how are yous, just, "Lena, we need a break. Jack and I are thinking Hawaii. Mom said you're free." I blinked. Free? What do you mean? She said you had no big obligations this week. The twins are dying to see you. We've already booked our tickets. I stood in the cafe kitchen, apron soaked with milk foam, the world tilting sideways. So, you and Jack are flying off to paradise, while I, a full-time student with 2 jobs, stay back and babysit your 5-year-olds. She giggled like I'd said something charming. Oh, come on, Lena. You're not tied down yet. You're young, flexible, and you love them. Before I could hang up, my phone lit up again. Mom, if you say no, Lena, I'll be truly disappointed. Have you ever done anything meaningful for this family? That sentence hit like a knife wrapped in velvet, and somehow, without thinking, I said yes. I arrived back in Toledo at dawn, stepping off the overnight bus with stiff legs and a heart made of concrete. Vanessa picked me up in her SUV, barely glancing from her phone. The twins screeched from the back seat, throwing juice boxes and gummy bears like confetti. I didn't ask how long I'd be needed. I didn't ask if I'd get a break. I already knew the answers. For the next 7 days, I was a one-woman childcare unit. 2 hyperactive children, 1 broken bedtime schedule, no support. Vanessa and Jack left every morning for couples yoga, beach walks, brunch with friends, and returned just before sunset with margarita breath and glowing skin. Each night, as I collapsed on the couch with my legs throbbing and a cold slice of pizza on my lap, I'd wonder if this was what it meant to be useful. If this was the currency of love in my family, sacrifice without acknowledgement. The final night, Vanessa handed me a cheap plastic pineapple keychain. "Got this for you," she said with a laugh. "Souvenir. You survived the twins." I stared at it, bright yellow, chipped at the edge, dangling on a rusty metal loop. A $2 insult masquerading as a thank you. I smiled politely, walked into the kitchen, and dropped it straight into the trash. That was the exact moment something inside me cracked, not loud or dramatic, but quiet, final, like the last thread snapping on a worn-out rope. I realized they would never stop. As long as I kept showing up, they would keep taking. And yet, I still didn't leave. I wish I could say I stood up, packed my bags, stormed out the front door. But the truth is, part of me still clung to the delusion that maybe they'd change. That maybe, if I just tried a little harder, someone would finally see me. So instead, I stayed quiet, and I started planning. That fall, I returned to Chicago and threw myself into work. I picked up double shifts at the cafe, started helping with bookkeeping at a phone repair shop downtown, and saved every spare dollar. No coffee runs, no impulse spending, no new shoes. I called it my escape fund in a secret folder on my desktop. By February, I had scraped together just over $900. It wasn't much, but to me it was gold. My plan was simple. A solo beach trip to Hilton Head Island. No babysitting. No phone calls. Just sand, sea breeze, and silence. For the first time in my life, I would go somewhere without anyone needing something from me. I booked the room at a modest seaside inn. Wooden floors, white curtains, nothing fancy, but it had a view of the ocean. I reserved the bus ticket. I packed my bag a week in advance. I told no one. But then came my 25th birthday. We were at a small family gathering. Just cake and tea in the living room, nothing extravagant. Vanessa smiled sweetly and handed me an envelope. A surprise from all of us, she said. Inside was a round-trip plane ticket to Florida. We're all going to the resort together, my mom exclaimed. You'll share a room with the kids. They're so excited to spend time with Aunt Lena again. I felt my throat tighten. So this is for all of us? A family vacation. My father nodded. We already booked the suites, the restaurants, even the dolphin cruise. It'll be a proper getaway. Vanessa chimed in, patting my shoulder like I was a pet. Thanks in advance for helping. Jack and I have a few spa sessions lined up. You're amazing. I looked around at their glowing faces, and something inside me turned cold. I smiled, just enough to not raise suspicion. I nodded along, thanked them, even sent a message in the family group chat that night. Can't wait. But my real plan was already in motion. The next morning, I booked a new flight. Not to Florida. Not with them. To Hilton Head Island. Alone. The airport was already buzzing when I arrived at 6 a.m., dragging my suitcase across polished tile floors that reflected too much light. I had barely slept. My palms were clammy. My heart thudded with every step like I was walking into a courtroom, not an escape hatch. My parents were already waiting near the gate, my father pacing in his pressed khakis, my mother fussing with Vanessa's boarding pass. The twins were there too, screaming, running in circles around the check-in poles, already high on sugar and anticipation. I smiled when I saw them. I waved, hugged each person politely, even crouched down to pat one of the boys on the shoulder. We're going to have so much fun, I whispered, and meant none of it. I just need to run to the restroom, I said, checking my watch. I'll meet you all at the gate. Be quick, my mother warned. They start boarding in 30 minutes. I nodded, but instead of turning left toward the restrooms, I turned right, straight to Terminal B, where my flight to Hilton Head was already boarding. I had printed the ticket the night before, packed my bag with precision, deleted all family messages from my phone, and cleared my browsing history. Every step had been calculated. Still, my fingers trembled when I handed the agent my ID. Still, my heart raced as the boarding pass printed out with a quiet beep. Still, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, "You could go back. You still have time." But I didn't. I tucked the pass into my jacket pocket and headed for Gate 12. A few minutes later, I found a seat near the window, out of sight, and pulled out my phone. My family was likely just realizing I hadn't returned. I typed the message quickly. I'm not going to Florida. I chose my own vacation. I hope everyone enjoys their trip, just like I'm enjoying my freedom. Then I hit send and turned off the phone. When I finally boarded the plane, I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. As the seat reclined and the plane began its slow roll toward the runway, I leaned my head against the cold window and watched the sky shift from gray to gold. The city fell away beneath us like a memory I didn't need to carry anymore. When we landed, I turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls, 17 voicemails, dozens of texts. Where are you? You're embarrassing us. The kids are asking for you. Your sister is crying. Who do you think you are? I scrolled through them all, then set my phone to silent. That afternoon, I walked barefoot along the beach, feeling the warm sand pull gently against my heels. The ocean was quiet. Not like in the movies, no dramatic crashing waves, just soft, rhythmic murmurs, like the world whispering back. You made it. I stopped by a tiny shop on the boardwalk, bought a simple string of seashells, and hung it on the doorknob of my room. My first victory. It didn't come with applause. No cake. No fireworks. No, we're so proud of you. But it was mine. And that was enough. That night, I lay on the bed, the fan humming above me, salt still clinging to my skin. I laughed, real, guttural laughter, for the first time in months. Not the laugh you use to mask exhaustion or diffuse tension. This was different. This was freedom taking shape and sound. I had waited 25 years to feel this way, and now I was done waiting. 3 days after I returned to Chicago, they showed up at my door. I had just stepped out of the elevator, a grocery bag in one arm, and my headphones still playing some lo-fi track I couldn't even hear anymore, because there, right outside apartment 4B, stood my mother, arms crossed, lips tight, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Behind her was my father, jaw clenched, and behind him, Vanessa and Jack, dragging the twins who were wailing like sirens in the hallway. "We need to talk," my mother said, stepping forward like this was her home. "Not here," I replied, key halfway in the lock. "Don't act so arrogant, Lena," my father hissed. "You've disgraced this family." I pushed the door open and left it ajar. They stormed in like a pack of wolves, chasing the scent of blood. Vanessa was first to strike. "You abandoned us at the airport," she snapped. "The kids cried for days. Do you even understand what you did to them? To me?" Jack chimed in with that same smugness he always wore like cologne. "Who's going to pay for the canceled hotel rooms? The flights? The dolphin tour?" I stood in the middle of my tiny apartment, the thrift store sofa, the peeling linoleum, the smell of instant noodles still hanging in the air, and looked at them. For angry people crammed into a space built for quiet. I wasn't afraid. I was tired. And finally, free enough to say what had been living inside my ribs for years. "I owe you nothing," I said softly. My mother blinked. "What did you say?" "I owe none of you anything," I repeated, louder now, firmer. "Not my time. Not my weekends. Not my youth. Not my silence. I've been your free nanny, your emotional sponge, your backup plan for too long. And I'm done." "You're being dramatic," my father snapped. "We've supported you, supported me." I laughed, a sharp, bitter thing. "You threw money at Vanessa's wedding, her house, her vacations. You told me to work part-time and take out loans for college. You used me." "Lena," Vanessa said, stepping forward like she still believed we could fix it. "We're family. We've all made sacrifices." "No," I said, voice low, eyes locked on hers. "I made sacrifices. You made plans, and expected me to rearrange my life to fit them." Jack rolled his eyes. "You're going to end up alone, you know. No husband. No kids. No help when you're older." I smiled a cold, slow smile that tasted like iron and truth. "At least I'll have peace." There was a silence then, not just in the room, but in me. Like a storm had passed and left only clarity behind. My mother opened her mouth to say something else, but I was already moving. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and stepped aside. "You need to leave." "Lena, now." One by one, they filed out, muttering protests and insults under their breath. Vanessa looked back once, her eyes wide, like maybe she'd never really seen me until that moment. I didn't flinch. When the door closed, I locked it, all 3 bolts. Then I slid down to the floor, my back against the wood, listening to the sound of their footsteps fading down the hall. And I exhaled, a long, trembling breath I hadn't allowed myself to take in years. They had come to reclaim their control, to guilt me, shame me, drag me back into the role I was born into but never chose. But they failed, because this time I chose me. 1 week later I moved, not just across the street or to a different zip code, but out of their reach. I found a tiny one-bedroom unit in Ravenswood, on the far north side of Chicago. The ceilings were low, the floors creaked, and the rent made my stomach clench every time I paid it, but no one knew the address. No one had a spare key. No one could show up at my door demanding that I give up one more piece of myself. I changed my phone number. I changed my email. I opened a new bank account. And just like that, I vanished from their world as if I had never existed. Each morning, I jogged along the quiet streets near the river, breathing air that belonged to no one but me. I'd stop at the corner cafe, not the one I worked in, just one I liked, order a cup of black coffee, and watch the morning sunlight stretch across the pavement. No one called me selfish. No one handed me crying children before I'd finished my toast. No one told me I wasn't enough or too much or in the way. At work, things moved fast. My internship at Ardent and Finch turned into a full-time offer. Long hours, tight deadlines demanding clients, but every ounce of effort I gave came back to me, directly in experience and growth and confidence. There was no emotional toll extracted as tax. Each month, I put a little aside into a secret folder on my desktop labeled Freedom Fund. I didn't know what I was saving for. Maybe a solo trip to Europe, maybe grad school, maybe just the right to say no without checking my bank balance first. Some nights were hard. There were evenings I came home too exhausted to cook and ate peanut butter crackers for dinner. Nights I stared at the ceiling and missed something I couldn't name. Not love exactly, but maybe the idea of it. The idea that somewhere someone would call and say, "I'm proud of you." But when I missed them, I opened a folder I'd saved, screenshots of every message they'd sent after I left. The accusations, the guilt trips, the demands. I'd read them one by one until my chest stopped aching, until I remembered why I left in the first place. One Friday afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the small living room, the doorbell rang. Not a knock, a chime, soft and unfamiliar. I peeked through the peephole. A delivery guy stood there holding a box. "Lena Carter," he asked. I nodded. "Someone sent this. Said it's for your new beginning." Inside the box was a small cactus in a ceramic pot and a handwritten card. "No one grows thorns unless they've been stepped on first. Kelly." I placed it by the window. It looked small but unbreakable. That night, I sat on my tiny balcony with a glass of red wine, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Below, the city buzzed with movement, cars honking, someone laughing too loudly, the world spinning like it always had. But inside me, everything had changed. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I wasn't the stand-in parent. I wasn't the unpaid help or the emergency contact or the background character in someone else's story. I was Lena, complete, whole, and free. When Thanksgiving rolled around, my phone buzzed with a familiar number. I let it ring. A text followed. "Your sister really hopes you'll come home this year. The kids miss you. We miss you. It won't be the same without you." I didn't respond. Some silences are not about anger, they're about peace. And I wasn't about to trade mine for anyone else's comfort.